Welcome back to Conflicts of Interest. This is episode 732, and today is December 23rd, 2024. I'm the host of the show, Kyle Anzalone. Hope everybody is enjoying their Christmas week here. To kick off the week, we have a huge show. I mean, start to finish, every story is a major story. So, a lot to talk about, a lot to break down on today's show. If we don't get to anything, don't worry. I will have shows out either on this channel or the Kyle Anzalone Show channel coming out during the rest of the week. So we will get to everything. We will be breaking everything down, keeping up with it, even through the holiday. As we get to the end of the year here, I really appreciate all of your support, particularly those of you who have headed over to the new channel, the Kyle Anzalone Show channel, and are subscribing to the show, watching the show, commenting on the show. All of that is really huge when you have a new podcast, and quite a few of you are doing it. So anybody else who feels like heading over to the new channel, it's the first link in the show notes page. And then don't forget to leave a comment or at least a like on one of the videos that you watch over there. All right, everybody, let's get into it. First up here, Moscow vows response after Ukraine fires more U.S. and British missiles into Russia. So this one from Dave DeCamp on December 19th. Ukrainian forces fired 6 U.S. provided Army tactical missile systems and 4 British Storm Shadow missiles into Russia on Wednesday, and Moscow is vowing it will respond. The defense, according to Russian media, the NATO-supported attack targeted a large chemical plant. The Russian Defense Ministry said these actions by the Kiev regime, supported by Western handlers, won't be left unanswered. The ministry said that all the attackers were shot down by Russian air defenses, and 3 of the 4 Storm Shadows were intercepted. One of the missiles fell and caused damage on the grounds of the chemical plant. President Biden gave Ukraine the green light to use U.S. and British long-range missiles to strike deep targets in Russian territory, despite Moscow making it clear it would risk nuclear escalation. Since then, Ukraine has launched several attacks on Russian territory using the U.S.-provided missiles. President-elect Donald Trump has called the Biden's decision to sign off on the long-range strikes stupid and suggested he could reverse the move. You also had his envoy to the conflict, that's Keith Kellogg, and his national security advisor Mike Waltz come out and explicitly endorse the Biden move. So certainly some differing opinions on this within the Trump camp. Hopefully the president is actually articulating his policy here and is really saying that he would reverse this move, where it's not going to be like a Syria or Somalia situation from his first term, where he has all this big talk on ending conflicts and actually can't get it done because the personnel that he put in place disagrees with him and he won't stand up to his own personnel. So the advanced missile requires intelligence from either the U.S. or its allies to be fired, meaning attacks are directly supported by NATO countries. Earlier this year, a German military released that British soldiers are, quote, on the ground in Ukraine, helping to fire the Storm Shadow missiles. And so with the ATACMS, it's pretty clear that the West is doing essentially everything we're providing the missiles, we're telling the Ukrainians logistically where to put them in place, how to position them on the battlefield so the Russians won't destroy them before they fire their long-range missiles, figuring out which variant of the ATACMS to use, either the 100-mile variant that's a cluster munition or the 200-mile variant that's a unitary warhead. We also have the HIMARS that have a 50-mile range. And so there are a lot of different things that the US and the UK are doing to help Ukraine fire these missiles. Now, with the US missiles, it seems like the Ukrainians are definitely pushing the button on the ground. So we may tell them what to shoot at. We may help them to position the military units to make sure it all works. But it is Ukrainian either flipping the switch or hitting the red button on the machine to actually fire the missile. Now, with the UK variant, the Storm Shadows, that's a little bit less clear, since there are actually British soldiers on the ground helping to fire the missiles. And so that may just be essentially a British operation in Ukraine moving around and firing at Russian targets. I'm sure from the Russian perspective, that's more or less how they look at this situation. So, in response to previous attack amid Storm Shadow's attacks in Russia, the Russian military launched a new intermediate-range missile into Ukraine known as the Oreshnik. The missile was not believed to be carrying an explosive since little damage was done, and Putin referred to it as a test launch. A strike with a conventionally armed Oreshnik could cause major damage, as Putin suggested the missile could replace nuclear weapons as Russia's deterrent. And I guess it's because of the speed that the missile travels that makes it so destructive, even without a nuclear warhead on it, or a warhead at all, as we saw previously. Next up here, British Defense Minister says UK forces could be sent to Ukraine for training. So the British Defense Minister John Healey suggested that the UK could send troops to UK for a training mission. Now, again, this is not 100% unsurprising because we've had the French and the Polish talk about this before, and we already know that there's British soldiers on the ground in Ukraine. And so it could be that they're looking at sending a very limited number, less than a dozen or so soldiers to Ukraine, in which case I could see them being able to get away with it. But this report does make it sound like we're talking about, dozens of soldiers, if not hundreds, to train a large number of Ukrainian soldiers, in which case I would guess that they would become targets of Russia. And so who knows, how far things escalate from there. All right, moving on. This next one is from our friend Connor Freeman. He wrote it for antiwar.com on December 20th. Saudi driver plows into German Christmas market, kills at least 5 and injures 200. So Connor writes, a Saudi Arabian citizen reportedly drove a rented car into a crowd of people at a Christmas market in Germany's city of Magdeburg on Friday. At least 5 people were killed, including a child, with over 200 wounded. According to officials, the driver had been identified as a 50-year-old Saudi Arabian citizen who first arrived in Germany in 2006. He was recognized as a refugee in Berlin 10 years later. He has since been working as a small-town psychiatry and psychotherapy consultant 20 miles south of where the attack took place. The driver has been arrested, and officials tentatively believe he is working alone. German media is calling the suspect Talib A. Prosecutors confirmed his identity as Talib al-Abumashin. According to Reuters, Talib A's social media posts indicate support for anti-Islam and far-right parties such as the Alternative for Germany or the AfD, as well as criticisms of Germany for its handling of Saudi refugees. The German Interior Minister Nancy Faeser explained authorities can't say with certainty that the perpetrator was obviously Islamophobic. So, per spokesperson for the city and regional government, with over 200 victims in deliberate attack, 40 have been injured severely. Authorities are still working to establish a motive. So the official added that this is a terrible event, especially now in the days leading up to Christmas. More than 1,000 Christmas markets are put up in Germany each year. These have come under previous attack, including in 2006, when a truck plowed into a Berlin crowd, killing 13 people. As a result, these places have been given additional security from police. However, it is still unclear how the driver evaded barriers protecting the market. Surveillance footage being shared on social media shows a dark BMW slamming into the market, with those wounded subsequently withering in pain and screaming before the vehicle turns right down another crowded street. BBC reports that the driver rammed his way across 400 meters of the market before being subdued by police officers who drew their guns at the vehicle before it stopped. During a press conference on Saturday, a chief prosecutor said, it looks like the background to this crime could have been dissatisfaction with the treatment of Saudi Arabian refugees in Germany. But what is deeper behind this is the subject of investigation. This comes as immigration is a top issue for voters in Germany, with the topic, along with the economic issues, dominating the election season. Germany has been taking in considerable numbers of refugees from war-torn countries like Syria, where Berlin's NATO allies Washington and Turkey are currently backing al-Qaeda's takeover in the capital city, Damascus. So the suspected terrorist said during a 2019 media interview, "I am the most aggressive critic of Islam in history. If you do not believe me, ask the Arabs." So let's see. He also says here that Germany wants to Islaminize Europe, and German police were using dirty tactics against me and other critics of Islam to destroy our anti-Islam activism, he said. So his motives here seem very interesting, being a Saudi citizen, being so anti-Islam, apparently pro-AFD, which my understanding was somewhat inhospitable to the migrants. And so if he's concerned about the treatment of Saudi refugees in Germany, then you wouldn't imagine him being a supporter of the AFD, unless of course a lot of the Saudis in Germany are some kind of anti-Islamist activists because they're victims of the government or something like that. All right, so this is a really important story, especially in the week leading up to Christmas. And, I think it's probably an important message for Christians to hear. Pope Francis doubles down on criticisms of Israel's cruelty in Gaza. So Pope Francis has doubled down on calling out Israel's cruelty in Gaza after he was criticized by the Israeli Foreign Ministry. Pope Francis first made comments on Saturday when he said Israel prevented the Latin Patriarch of Jerusalem from entering Gaza. He explained, "Yesterday they did not allow the Patriarch into Gaza as promised. Yesterday children were bombed. This is cruelty, not war." The Pope was referencing an airstrike on Friday that hit a home in Jabalia, killing 7 children from the same family. He added that, "I want to say it because it touches my heart." So the Israeli Foreign Ministry responded by saying the Pope's remarks are particularly disappointing as they are disconnected from the true and factual content of Israel's fight against jihadist terrorism, a multi-front war that was forced upon it starting on October 7th. The ministry added the blame should be directly solely at the terrorists, not the democracy defending itself against them. Enough with the double standards and the singling out of the Jewish state and its people. Pope Francis was not deterred by the statement and offered more sympathy for the plight of the Palestinians on Sunday, saying, "And with pain I think of Gaza, of so much cruelty, of the children being machine gunned, of the bombings of schools and hospitals. What cruelty." So also on Sunday, the Latin Patriarch of Jerusalem, Cardinal, I'm not going to try to pronounce his name, was able to enter Gaza, bringing attention to the enclave's small Christian minority. He has led Mass at the Holy Family Catholic Church in Gaza City and visited the nearby St. Porphyrius's Orthodox Church. Both Christian churches have come under attack from Israel. In October of 2023, an Israeli strike killed 18 Palestinian civilians who were sheltering at one of the churches, including a relative of former Congressman Justin Amash. In July 2024, Israeli shelling hit a building in the compound of the church again, causing minor damage and wounding 3. The Holy Family Catholic Church was under siege in December of 2023, and 2 young women were shot and killed by Israeli snipers while on the grounds. Seven others who are trying to help the women were wounded. At the time, Pope Francis denounced the attack as terrorism. Pope Francis has also called for an investigation into whether or not Israel's committing a genocide. He said, "According to some experts, what is happening in Gaza has the characteristics of a genocide. We should investigate carefully to determine whether it fits into the technical definition formulated by jurists and international bodies." The Pope has consistently called for peace in Gaza and other conflict zones around the world. On Sunday, he added, "Let's pray so that Christmas there may be a ceasefire on all war fronts in Ukraine, in the Holy Land, throughout the Middle East, and the entire world. May weapons be silenced and Christmas carols resound." And that would be fantastic, but the U.S. government doesn't care about what the Pope says, doesn't care about peace. War is profitable for the White House, and so it will keep going. And of course, Israel sees opportunity to exploit the victory it is currently on, or it believes it's on. And so I think Israel is also unlikely to listen to the Pope and to de-escalate anytime soon. Something that Netanyahu more or less explained over the weekend. This story here, Netanyahu says Israel won't end war until Israel removes Hamas from Gaza. So the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said in an interview published by the Wall Street Journal on Friday that he wouldn't end the genocidal war in Gaza as long as Hamas remains, making it clear he would not agree to a hostage deal that includes a permanent truce. Netanyahu explained, "I'm not going to agree to end the war before we remove Hamas. We're not going to leave them in power in Gaza 30 miles from Tel Aviv. It's not going to happen." Netanyahu's comments came amid reports that hostage deal talks were making progress, while Hamas has reportedly conceded to Israeli demands that the first phase of the deal won't include an Israeli withdrawal from Gaza. The group is still seeking an arrangement that would result in the gradual end to the Israeli occupation. According to media reports, the potential on the table would include an initial humanitarian phase during which Hamas would release female, elderly, and sick hostages in exchange for the release of some Palestinian detainees. The next phase would involve the release of the remaining hostages and the body as dead hostages in exchange for the Israeli withdrawal from Gaza. An analysis from Haaretz noted that Netanyahu's comments make clear that Israel would only go through with the humanitarian phase and restart the military operations after that. The Haaretz report adds, "Now Hamas will be afraid to walk into Netanyahu's trap, and American guarantees that Israel won't resume the fighting, and there's a significant chance that once again the talks will break down." During previous rounds of negotiations, Netanyahu made similar statements that led Hamas into asking for stronger guarantees, which Israel then rejected and pretended like it was Hamas who was thwarting the deal. So the Haaretz report adds, "It's impossible to avoid the impression that Netanyahu's fear of his government collapsing trumps his concern for the return of the hostages." And this has been something that's, I think, a consensus in Israeli society that Netanyahu is doing this. It's been widely reported by Israeli military. There's protests in Israel with the protesters, including the family members of the hostages, demanding Netanyahu step down, accept a ceasefire, and are criticizing him for not agreeing to one. It's really only in the United States of America that we pretend that it's just Hamas that's causing the problem here, and then the problem for not having a ceasefire is Netanyahu. So Dave goes on in his article. The Israeli military actions on the ground are also making it clear that the Israeli occupation in Gaza will not end anytime soon. Since early October, Israeli forces have been conducting an ethnic cleansing campaign in northern Gaza, which involves destroying every building in sight so Palestinian civilians have nowhere to return. The campaign is likely to lead to the establishment of Jewish settlements, an idea openly supported by the Israeli military and Knesset members. All right, now we have a pretty major event here. Dozens of Israelis wounded as Houthi rocket strikes Tel Aviv. So back and forth strikes between Israel and the Shiite Houthi movement in Yemen seem to be growing in the past week. On Thursday morning, Israel launched multiple airstrikes against the Houthi-controlled parts of Yemen, killing at least 9. Overnight Friday, the Houthis responded with a rocket. The Houthis reportedly said they had aimed at an unspecified military target in Tel Aviv with a Palestinian II hypersonic missile. The Israeli military reported that 23 people were likely injured by shattered glass and another 14 were injured trying to flee to the shelters. Reportedly, the missile hit a public park and alarms were activated across central Israel, leading to millions to flee to the shelters. The Israeli military air defenses failed to intercept the missile, and officials are saying they intend to launch an investigation to figure out why that was. Also interesting, Israel does have the U.S. THAAD interceptor deployed, and you would maybe think that In this case, a THAAD could have been used, or at least the radar system could have been used to try to track this missile. And so maybe this missile was even able to beat some of the top American interceptors. Israel has long considered the Houthis to be one of the 7 fronts that is fighting at the same time. In practice, Yemen is far enough away from Israel that there has been minimal exchanges for the most part. That might be changing. The Houthis have held northern Yemen since 2014, and a Saudi-led invasion was launched shortly after to try to unite the country under a different faction. Fighting has been ongoing ever since. The ongoing Israeli war in the Gaza Strip has increased the regional implications of the Houthis' presence as they are attacking Western ships, both civilian and military, passing through the area near their shoreline as a part of an effort to try to help the Palestinians. That has led to a number of U.S. and British airstrikes against northern Yemen as well, though so far it has not ended up removing the Houthis from power or even deterring their ability to hit these cargo ships in the Red Sea. Now, this is huge. U.S. says FA-18 shot down over Red Sea in friendly fire incident. So those strikes led to the U.S. apparently shooting down one of its own planes. So the U.S. military said Sunday that one of its FA-18 fighter jets was shot down over the Red Sea early Sunday in an apparent friendly fire incident, which came after the command said it launched more airstrikes on Yemen. The 2 pilots safely ejected from the aircraft with only one suffering minor injuries. CENTCOM said the jet took off from the aircraft carrier, the USS Harry S. Truman, and was mistakenly shot down by the guided missile carrier, the Gettysburg. According to the Associated Press, U.S. Navy ships and aircraft shot down Houthi drones and 1 cruise missile right before the incident. The Houthis, officially known as Ansar Allah, said the downing of the FA-18 was a result of the operation it launched against the USS Truman and other warships. So Yemen's TV reported a Houthi military spokesperson statement. The Yemeni armed forces carried out the strategic operation using 8 cruise missiles, 17 drones. The operation resulted in the downing of an F-18 aircraft as the destroyers attempted to intercept the Yemeni drones and missiles. And so, look, this could have been a pure act of incompetence on the part of the Americans. We shouldn't entirely dismiss, and that may even be the most likely scenario here, that this is really just a full-on bout of incompetence. We have an F-18 in a similar place that we have Yemeni cruise missiles and drones, and somehow the plane gets targeted. It's definitely possible, maybe even likely. Also not impossible that the Houthis were in some way maybe trying to exploit the presence of the F-18 to hide or mask their drones to make it unlikely that the Americans wouldn't use certain kinds of air defense systems. And in some sense, this was Houthi military strategy that actually ended up downing the American aircraft, even if it was with the Americans' own missile. Think back to Syria, I want to say maybe 2018, 2019, when an Israeli, I want to say was an F-15, used a Russian spy plane as a pick for a Syrian launch, but a Russian anti-aircraft missile that ended up downing the Russian plane and I believe killing 8 Russian soldiers. And so these kind of strategies are certainly possible, and I think it's possible that the Houthis are at least partly responsible and can partly claim credit here for the downing of this plane. So early Saturday, a Houthi missile landed in Yemen, lightly injuring a dozen people. The attack came 2 days after Israel pounded energy infrastructure in Sana'a and Yemeni ports in the Red Sea province of Hodeidah, killing at least 9 workers. Since last year, the Houthis have been launching attacks on Israeli-linked shipping and firing missiles and drones at Israel in response to the onslaught in Gaza. In January of this year, the U.S. began a new bombing campaign against the Houthis and launched hundreds of missiles strikes on Yemen that have done nothing but to escalate the situation. The Houthis then started targeting American shipping in response and have expanded their attacks on Israel. From 2015 until 2022, the U.S. supported a Saudi-UAE war against the Houthis, which involved heavy airstrikes and a blockade. Before that, in 2014 and in the very early of 2015, it's worth noting that the U.S. was working with the Houthis to attack al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula before switching sides and backing backing the AQAP side in that war, which was the Saudi UAE side. So as the fighting has gone on, the Houthis have only become a more effective fighting force. I've joked on this show that if aliens invaded, we should look to the Houthis as being the first group to develop photon missiles. All right, next up here, Turkey demands U.S. end support for Syrian Kurds. Jason Ditz from antiwar.com writes, the U.S. has been repeatedly trying to reassure their Kurdish allies that they won't face a major threat from Turkey. Turkey, however, seems to be going out of their way to make it clear that they are very much a threat and that their goal in the region is to end Kurdish autonomy in Syria. On Friday, Turkish President Erdogan said that there was no longer any reason for the international community to back the Kurdish SDF and demanded other nations, particularly the United States, end their support for the group. Though the demand has been renewed since the Turkish-backed regime change in Syria, it is not entirely new, as Turkey has been demanding the U.S. stop backing the SDF for many years now. The U.S. chose to get out of Turkey's way for an anti-Kurdish offensive in 2019, a decision that led to a lot of criticism, though ultimately the U.S. did not remain unaligned with the SDF, which controls the area along with Syria's largest oil and natural gas fields, which the U.S. is stealing. With Assad ousted, Turkey seems to believe that they can convince the Islamist Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, or HTS, to tamp down on Kurdish ambitions for autonomy. The foreign minister said Turkey is prepared to do whatever it takes, up to and including military action, to see through if HTF proves unable to address the territorial integrity issue, which is to say, ensuring the Kurds don't retain any measure of autonomy that they enjoy now. The foreign minister elaborated on those comments on Sunday, saying that Turkey believed there is no room for the Kurdish YPG organization inside Syria. The YPG is the largest of the multiple factions that make up the SDF, and the Turks argue that the YPG is no different from the PKK, which is a Turkish militant group and labeled by Turkey and the United States as a terrorist organization. All right, here, everybody, we are wrapping up today's show with an article that I wrote for antiwar.com on December 20th. U.S. officials has good, productive meeting with Al-Qaeda-linked Jawlani in Damascus. So, America's top diplomat for the Middle East traveled to Syria to meet with Abu Mohammed al-Jawlani. Jawlani leads Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, HTS, a designated foreign terrorist organization. U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for Near East Affairs Barbara Leaf met with Jawlani in Damascus on Friday. One official described the meeting as, quote, good and productive. Leaf announced after the meeting that Washington would be dropping a $10 million reward for Jawlani's capture. She said, based on our discussions, I told him we would not be pursuing rewards for justice offered that has been in effect for some years. Jawlani fought for al-Qaeda in Iraq against American soldiers during the Iraq War. He then founded al-Qaeda's affiliate in Syria, the al-Nusra Front. In recent years, he has been attempting to soften his image by giving friendly interviews to Western journalists, often appearing in a suit and with a trimmed beard to obscure his jihadist ideology. Leaf said after meeting with Jawlani, who is now going by Ahmed al-Shara, I heard him on his priorities, which are very much rooted in getting Syria on the road to economic recovery. We've been hearing this for some time, some very pragmatic and moderate statements on various issues from women's rights protection to equality for all communities. It was a good first meeting. We will judge by deeds, not just words. However, speaking of words, one of Jawlani's spokesmen explained that women's role in Syria would be limited by their, quote, nature. The spokesman claimed, a woman is an important honored element in society, but her chat should be in line with the roles she can perform. For example, if we say a woman becomes responsible for the defense ministry, is this in accordance with her being psychological and biological neighbor? There is no doubt that that is not in with the accordance. And so I don't think that's a sign that we're going to see a particularly friendly country towards the women now that Jolani's in power. It's also been reported that he is demanding that non hijab wearing women wear a hijab in front of him. I'm not sure if that applied to Barbara Leaf or not, but that has applied to other women. In one of his first addresses to the Syrian people, he declared the institution of Sharia law. According to Israel National News, he said that the morality of police should enforce Islamic law through education rather than force. Jolani noted violence was still an option, though, saying the jihad is obligatory for this reason. So if somebody, you educate them and they don't agree with your jihadist education, well, then you wage the jihad and you force them to, with violence, comply to, the Sharia law by your interpretation. Leaf also said that Jolani led her to believe that Syria would not be used as a staging ground by terrorist groups. Still, Jolani's HTS is on the U.S. foreign terrorism list, although the positive meeting with Leaf could signal that the White House is prepared to remove the designations of terrorism and these sanctions on Syria. It looks, with the more new reporting coming out since I wrote that article, that that's more likely but not confirmed yet. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning into the show today. We'll be back with more later in the week. We won't have a show every single day this week. I'll definitely be taking Christmas off. Likely we'll be taking the day after Christmas off from doing a show as well. Just for people who are wondering why I would do a show on Christmas Eve and not the day after Christmas. Most of the work for this show is actually done the day before. Kind of process it the night before, then come out in the morning and put together the show. And so it's really not all that much work to actually get in front of the camera and do the show the morning of Christmas Eve, but it requires a lot of work the day before to, kind of compile all the stories that I want to talk about, get all my notes together, and make sure I have a good and complete show for y'all. So likely Tuesday show and then a Friday show. I do plan to put a couple episodes of the Kyle Anzalone show that have already been recorded and published on that channel in the podcast feed for conflicts of interest. So if some of you have not tuned into the Kyle Anzalone show yet, you can get a little sample of it that way. Anyways, thank you all so much for tuning into the show. I really appreciate all your support. Hope you have a good Christmas and get to spend some time with family.